Before we look at Mel Kiper's draft grades for Denver, who will be the week 1 starter? Jarrett, Stidham, or Bo Nix? Shoot your shot down below in the comments section. A tradition unlike any other draft grades, despite none of the players even putting on a uniform for the team yet. Mel Kiper went through all 32 teams, handed out letter grades. So we're going to react to the grade he gave the Denver Broncos, and we're going to break down what he said, and I'll give you my analysis on the draft class altogether. But let's look at Mel Kiper's draft grade for the 2024 Broncos draft class, which he gave a C+. Now, I don't think this was necessarily a home run draft, as others have called it. I gave it a B grade. I think a C+ is definitely too low for the Broncos. Whether or not you like, love, or dislike the Bo Nix pick, I think there's a lot to like about the other selections they made. Big fan of the Jonah Elliss selection. Like the Troy Franklin pick. I think Kris Abrams-Draine can be a starting nickel corner in this league. Like, there were some really good picks in there that I feel like a C+ is too low of a grade. But we know that it's a weighted scale, and what you do in round 1 matters a lot more than what you do in rounds 3 through 5. Now, here's what Mel Kiper wrote. Coach Sean Payton Co saw the run on quarterbacks, 5 in the top 10, and stood pat, selecting Bo Nix. I wrote at length about the move on Thursday, but to sum it up, that's way too high for Nix, who put up massive numbers at Oregon, but played in an offense in which he wasn't asked to go through read progressions. There's a ton of risk here. No one will remember that this pick was questioned if Nix becomes an immediate star, but Payton's Denver tenure is now tied to a passer with question marks. Let's do a little bit of a Bo Nix deep dive, because the comment section has been a little bit ruthless towards me. Even my future brother-in-law is like, I was watching your Broncos video, and he's not a Broncos fan. He's like, people are not happy with you. And the funny thing is, it's not like I've been saying Bo Nix is the worst pick in the draft. Was he my preferred pick? No. There are things to like about Bo Nix, but I think there are some valid concerns to have. And those concerns, to me, are important. Like, when you just look at Bo Nix's stats over the last 2 years, specifically at Oregon, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to fall in love with. But what I am seeing people fall into the trap of is Bo Nix threw 45 touchdowns last year. There's no way he's not going to be a great NFL quarterback. And you know who you are. Stop it. Look at the college football 40-plus touchdown passes list the last few years. There are some very good names on this list. There are also some not-so-good names. Clayton Tune, Austin Reed, Bailey Zappi, Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett threw 42. And then maybe most damning of all, Drew Lock led the country in touchdown passes back in 2017. And we all know how that worked out. Like, Anthony Gordon never took an NFL snap. There are some good names on here, but you've got some big misses too. Kyle Trask, Mac Jones, 2 players that went in the first 2 rounds of the draft. So do not fall trap to college stat production equals how good you'll be in the NFL. No, it just does not work that way. Players are put in different situations with different rosters and different schemes, and some will benefit more than others in college, but that does not mean your success is going to carry over to the pros just because you threw 40-plus touchdowns in college football. Now, when we take a deeper dive and a closer look at Bo Nix last year, I mean, you can see that he was a bit of a check down Charlie. And I know what Sean Payton said. They removed all the short passes, and they looked at the deep throws he made, and they became comfortable with that. And he did have some success pushing the ball down the field. Was he asked to do it a whole lot? No. 11% of his throws were 20-plus yards. And I looked at a lot of other college quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, who people have been comparing to Bo Nix, and their 20-plus yard passes and medium passes attempt percentage was much higher than what Bo Nix is. Now, a couple of the comments I think have been expressed by a handful of you. So I'm not just picking on these next 2 commenters specifically, because they definitely represent more than just themselves. But Quarantine Theater, do you know who else threw the ball right around the line of scrimmage? Patrick Mahomes, shortest air yards in the league. And that's actually true, and it may sound mind-boggling. The difference is Patrick Mahomes last year had Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice, 2 of the best yards after the catch receivers in the NFL. Bo Nix has neither waiting for him in Denver. Cortland Sutton is not a yak monster. Adam Trautman and Greg Dulcich are not yak monsters. So Patrick Mahomes was able to kind of get away with not pushing the ball down the field because his receiving room was geared to yards after the catch. The same is not said in Denver. So do not fall trap to going, Mahomes does it and he's great. Why can't Knicks do the same? Because they're not throwing to the same guys. Now we have this next comment coming in from Kane Merritt. Why would I subscribe to someone who literally doesn't know what he is talking about? Knicks' 9.8 yards per attempt is up there with Mahomes and Herbert's collegiate stats, if not better. Well, let's do a little bit of a closer look here because there is some truth to Bo Nix last year. Yards per attempt was nearly 10 yards, which would indicate he is throwing the ball down the field. But what that doesn't tell you is how much of that is the quarterback and how much of that is the receiver. Like if Bo Nix just threw it to a running back on a screen and the running back ran 50 yards, well, Bo Nix's yards per attempt is 50. But how much of the 50 yards did he actually throw for? Very few. He just dumped it off to a running back who did the rest. And in the NFL, your running backs aren't going to be able to do that as well as they could in college, which is why I like the average depth of target. How many yards down the line of scrimmage was the player Bo Nix throwing to? And you can compare that, like you did, Mr. Kane, to Mahomes and Herbert. And there's a much bigger difference between average depth of target for Nix, Mahomes, and Herbert than yards per attempt. I'm not saying Bo Nix is a bad quarterback. You don't throw all those passes and touchdowns and yards and few interceptions without being pretty good at your job. But in the NFL, we all know that the margins are razor thin. And I didn't have a first-round grade on Bo Nix. And my fear for Bo Nix and the Broncos is if he's not the next franchise quarterback for this team, it's only going to make matters worse because the 2 previous years, you did not have a first-round draft pick. So if you miss on Nix, that's now 3 straight years, essentially, with no first-rounder, which means whoever the next quarterback is already coming into a much tougher situation because it's not like those other first-round picks could have been used on a wide receiver, a new tackle, some player on defense to make big plays. It's already a taller mountain for this next quarterback potentially to climb because the previous 3 first years first-round picks were non-existent if Nix does not work out. Not saying Bo Nix sucks, just saying not in my selection at 12. I'm going to agree with Mel Kiper. This roster had some bigger needs, and I felt like the Bo Nix pick was a reach. So, Kane Martin, do I know what I'm talking about? If yes, go ahead and subscribe because I appreciate the effort and the dedication you put into your comment, and I feel like it's only fair for me to reciprocate that by putting my own effort into answering your question or comment. So, if I know my stuff, hit the sub button. Mel Kiper also wrote this. Now, I did like the Broncos' pick of Troy Franklin, who was Nix's top pass catcher at Oregon. I thought he'd go in round 2, and instead they were able to get him on day 3. Franklin and Nix's connection already is strong, as they combined for 1,300 yards and 14 scores a year ago. You can look at Troy Franklin's stats over the last few seasons, and all with them being at Oregon. And, of course, like with Bo Nix in his second year at Oregon and Troy Franklin in his third, these two formed a dynamic duo, 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. And so with that, I agree with Mel Kiper here. I like the Troy Franklin selection, especially in round 4. They traded up to get him, but in my mock draft, in the last 3 mock drafts I did, basically after the Jerry Jeudy trade, I pretty much always had Denver moving up in round 5 into round 4 because they had 3 fifth-round picks. This was not a very deep draft class. A lot of players are staying an extra year in college football because of the NIL and the transfer portal, which means you don't have the same amount of depth going into rounds 5 and 6 as previous years. So it never made sense for Denver to have 3 fifth-rounders. They should have always used one of those fifth-round picks to move up earlier into round 4. So even if it does not work out with Troy Franklin, I don't think they missed out on a great opportunity to get an extra player in round 5. They still had 2 fifth-rounders. I like the Franklin selection. Bo Nix is definitely going to be a little bit more comfortable in his first season with a familiar face on the field. Now, speaking of Bo Nix, his new jersey is out. If you want to go get it today, chatsports.com/Nix. I put all that information in the comments and description for you. I don't believe I've seen him announce a jersey number unless I missed it, but as soon as that number is announced, Fanatics will ship you the jersey. So it's number 1 right now, but it may not be number 1. My guess is you'll get number 10. So go to chatsports.com/Knicks to get a new Broncos jersey and specifically a Bo Nix jersey. Kiper also writing, Kris Abrams-Draine is a high-risk, high-reward cornerback who can make a big play but also get beat deep. Edge rusher Jonah Elliss had 12 sacks last season but is undersized at 6'2", 248. Audric Estime's stock dropped after he ran a 4.71 second 40-yard dash at the Combine, but his tape doesn't lie. I think he can be a good running back at the next level. Let's go in chronological order of the picks. Love the Jonah Elliss selection. He was the 4th edge rusher on my personal big board. 12 sacks last year as a 20-year-old pass rusher. Comes from a great lineage of NFL families. Love the Jonah Elliss selection. Big fan of it. The next one was Mizzou cornerback Kris Abrams-Draine. 5'11", 179 pounds. So probably not big enough to play as an outside corner in the NFL, but showed great speed at the Combine, 4.4 40-yard dash. 3-year starter for the Tigers with excellent production, 40 pass breakups and 7 interceptions in his career. The value of the nickel corner is only going up year after year. So even if Abrams-Draine is not a starter for this team, to back up Jaquan McMillan, if an injury were to pop up, trust me, you'd feel a lot better about Abrams-Draine being in there than someone else. So big fan of this selection as well. And then we got the Notre Dame running back, Audric Estime. 210 carries for 1,300-plus yards last year for the Fighting Irish. That's good for 18 total touchdowns. But like Kiper pointed out, there are some concerns about his speed. At the NFL Combine, he ran a 4.71 40-yard dash. Now, at the Notre Dame Pro Day, he ran a 4.61 40-yard dash. I'm going to caution you to just pump the brakes on Pro Day 40-yard dashes. It is notorious that at Pro Days, the stopwatch may be a little bit more quick than at the NFL Combine to benefit some of their players. Or maybe it's not 40 yards, but 39 and a half. This is not something new I'm introducing. Scouts across the country know that Pro Days are not always the most accurate way to get measurements and timings on players. But I did do some research on running backs that were drafted who ran a 4.6 40-yarder or longer. And I just did the last 4 years or so, and there were a lot of running backs, by the way, who ran over a 4.6 40-yard dash since 2020, and a lot of them were not drafted. Last year, you had Kenny McIntosh from Georgia. Tyler Algier and Kyron Williams are 2 examples of it working pretty well. And like I said, my draft reaction video to the pick, I think Audric is going to make a great goal line back for the Broncos, and that is what they need, a goal line back. But I do not believe he is going to turn into a 3-down running back because you've got some good players here, but you've definitely got some misses like Larry Roundtree and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I mean, misses are a strong word because these guys went in day 3 of the draft. The bar was not super high, and I'm not putting the bar super high for Estime, but I just think he's never going to be much more than a goal line back, similar to like a Tyler Algier or maybe a LaMichael Pirine or a Gary Brightwell. Kiper also wrote, as I said, Payton's future is aligned with the 6th best signal caller in this draft. And we know there's not a great history of 6 QBs being stellar in one draft class. Likely half of those guys will end up having mediocre careers. For Payton's sake, he better hope it's not his guy or he won't last with the Broncos. And Kiper's not wrong about the first part. I'm not going to say that Payton is going to get fired if Bo Nix is a failure. But we shared this graphic with you all weeks ago. And I looked back from like 2020 onwards, and I pulled all the drafts that had 3 or more successful quarterbacks picked. 2020 was a great year to go get a quarterback. Joe Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Hurts, I think we could all agree, have been successful quarterbacks. There were other quarterbacks picked in that draft class, but at least 4 were good. 2018, I'll say Baker, Josh Allen, and Lamar. And you may not even agree with Baker, but then you've only got Allen and Lamar. So Sam Darnold, like Josh Rosen, like there were some misses in that draft class. 2012, Luck, Wilson, and Cousins. 2004, Eli, Rivers, and Big Ben. So from 2020 onwards, We've only got 4 draft classes where it worked out for at least 3, and I'm kind of pushing it on one of those 3. And so it's very difficult to find drafts where you all get a great quarterback. Sounds great in the moment, but I agree with Kiper that history says of those 6 guys, probably half are going to be backups soon. You didn't believe me? Like, go look at Mac Jones. He was drafted in 2021. He's already a backup. So will Bo Nix, same goes for Zach Wilson, will Bo Nix be a bust? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments section below whether or not you think Nix is going to get Denver to the top of the mountain or not. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you all later.